Canadians have long been proud of living in a free country. However, over the last number of decades, it seems that freedom of religion and freedom of speech have been on a marked decline in our nation. Joining us to discuss this is Darlene McLean. She is the Executive Director of the Christian Embassy of Canada. She'll also be emceeing the upcoming Canadian Religion Freedom Summit taking place in Ottawa on February 4th. Welcome to Bridge City News, Darlene.
Thank you, Naveen. Great to be with you.
So before we get to talking about the summit, can you briefly tell us about the Christian Embassy of Canada?
Yes, with pleasure. The Christian Embassy of Canada is a non-government organization that works with diplomats, parliamentarians, and professional leaders, facilitating networking and helping them to thrive professionally, personally, and spiritually through our events and our chaplaincy. Diplomats from 130 countries and more than 400 Canadian MPs and senators work from Ottawa for much of the year. We inspire and connect them with business and professional leaders across Canada. And for those diplomats, parliamentary business leaders who are believers, we contribute to them becoming effective ambassadors for Christ in their leadership roles. Our vision is to see leaders everywhere leading for Jesus.
Now, as I said in my intro, you have the Canadian Religious Freedom Summit that's coming up in Ottawa on February 4th. But I understand that anyone is welcome to watch online as well.
That's correct. We welcome all those who desire to join us for a half day starting at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, or if you're in the Ottawa area, come and join us in person at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Whether you're an interested citizen, parliamentarian, or otherwise, this summit promises to be eye-opening.
Now, what's so important about this conference to Canadians, and what do you hope to accomplish in the areas of freedom of religion and freedom of speech?
Well, we are at a decisive moment for Canada, and this conference addresses a key issue. Freedom of conscience, religion, and belief are being threatened. They underpin all other freedoms, and protecting freedom of conscience and religion is an important part of ensuring that all people are treated with equal dignity and respect. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms protects our right to believe what we want and practice those beliefs. And we as Canadians are accustomed to having rights, but we often take them for granted. Currently in Canada, laws, governments, and many people want people of faith to stop being able to act on their beliefs, which includes beliefs about life, sexuality, marriage, and sharing our faith. This summit is designed specifically for those who are Christians to advocate for the beliefs of all. But even more important, Christians believe that Canadians have the right and the privilege to hear biblical truth. As is the motto of our summit this year, we want to protect and promote freedom for good news in the marketplace. Christians have a God-given mandate to share the gospel so that all people, including Canadians, will know that there is a God who loves each one deeply.
Now, you have a great lineup of speakers this year. Can you mention a few of your headline speakers?
Certainly. I'll highlight a few of them. First, though, just so you know, this year we're hosting two kinds of presentations. There'll be a number of short testimonies, as well as longer analyses of what is happening right now and how Canadians and Christians can engage our culture. So there are a number of those 5-minute testimonies that I talked about. Canadians who've been discriminated against because of their Christian beliefs. So this includes a young man from Nova Scotia, suspended from his high school for wearing an evangelistic t-shirt, an Edmonton psychologist forced out of her office space because she refused to back down from her faith, a leader from BC hospice persecuted because her clinic does not want to euthanize patients. And then included in the 4 speakers giving an analysis, there is Dr. Erwin Lutzer, former pastor of Moody Church and a prize-winning author, who present ideas on how to respond to a often hostile culture. And then Larry Worthen is another one of the 4. He's with the Christian Medical and Dental Association, and he's going to speak about how Christian medical staff are being persecuted and what can be done about that.
Now, I think a lot of people will be interested in hearing from the Finnish Member of Parliament, Päivi Räsänen, as her case brought so much international attention to freedom of speech. I believe she finally did win in court after being criminally charged with hate speech for quoting the Bible to support her views on traditional marriage.
Yes, that's right, Naveen. She's a very courageous woman, and she did win in court. However, her case is being appealed, and she could still go to jail. Why? As you alluded to, she was tweeting Bible verses supporting the marriage of a man and a woman, and she wrote a pamphlet supporting the biblical view of sexuality. Her story is a powerful example of what happens when citizens of a country don't take religious freedom seriously and lose it, as well as the opportunity to share truth with others. In John 15, verses 18 to 19, Jesus promised that if the world hated him, it would hate his followers too. And so this means that Christians, including us, shouldn't be surprised when an increasingly secular culture begins to discriminate against us for our faith.
Now, it's interesting to ponder what would have happened if she had lost her case. Like, some may argue, well, it's okay, she may just be a Christian with extreme views, but would this possibly lead to other religious and non-religious organizations being shut down for sharing unpopular views?
Well, Christians have long held the view that God designed marriage as something good to be reserved for one man and one woman for their lifetime. And in fact, millions of Canadians of various faiths hold a similar belief. Billions of people around the world hold this view. It isn't an extremist view, and those who hold it shouldn't be discriminated against because they trust God's design for sexuality. Is it not those who want to force them or us out of our office space that are being extreme? There are many who've said that if we don't exercise our rights, we will lose them. And when you ask the question too, I think anyone who does not share the publicly promoted narrative could well be shut down.
Now, where is Canada at these days when it comes to conscience rights for those in the medical profession? Do physicians and nurses still have the right to opt out of medical procedures that go against their personal beliefs?
Our speaker, Larry Worthen of the Christian Medical and Dental Association, he'll help to explore those questions in more detail. But I'll just make a brief comment. Currently, there are many Canadian medical professionals and personnel who are being forced to endorse euthanasia, abortion, sex change operations, and more against their beliefs. Should not freedom of conscience and religion be extended to these medical workers who view human life as sacred and worthy of dignity?
And a lot of physicians, they have their conscience, but then they also have their Hippocratic oath to do no harm. So and then to be penalized for that seems a little bit extreme, wouldn't you think?
Indeed, it does. And that's where I think it'll be fascinating to be able to hear Mr. Worthen as he addresses what has been going on in the country over the last number of years.
Now, this past year saw an increased focus on the issue of abortion following the U.S. Supreme Court decision on Roe v. Wade. For anyone in Canada who wants to protest against abortion, what kinds of problems are they likely to run into?
Well, there is pushback, and not only related to the right to protest. One of our speakers is a Black disabled woman who survived sexual trauma. Talia will share that her own university services, including feminist and disabled groups, refuse to help her in her crisis. Why? Because she is pro-life. So what's at stake isn't only the right to protest, that is already threatened. As we see, in Ottawa and other settings, but also what's threatened is the right of Canadians to speak up for the value of every single human life.
Now, we are living in times where there is societal pressure to think alike on social and moral issues, leaving very little room for debate or discussion. So if someone does disagree with the majority view, they tend to be labeled as being hateful and intolerant and are then shunned. Any thoughts on where this is headed and what can be done to turn the tide?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. Current responses are indeed putting a chill on discussion and seem to keep alternative views and facts from being brought to light. Many are fearful to raise an alternative perspective as a result. And even sort of specific to what we've been talking about, there is a strongly promoted mindset that if we love someone, we must agree with everything they say or do. But most of us know from our experience as a child, a parent, a spouse, or otherwise that that's actually false. We can deeply love someone and not agree with what they say or even how they say it. That's true tolerance. And it's, yeah, one thing that is an example of non tolerance is what's happening very recently to this Russian hockey player who refuses to wear a rainbow flag contrary to his religious beliefs. Media, commentators, others are saying that in the name of inclusion, he should be excluded from playing hockey. So this reaction reveals the agenda, excluding people who disagree in the name of inclusion. So this kind of mentality will indeed destroy democracy, which is built on the idea of interaction, discussion, and the idea that disagreement is not hate. You ask what can be done to turn the tide? Christians and other people of goodwill need to speak up when this kind of attack takes place, reaching out to political leaders, to the media, and most importantly, to our colleagues and neighbors to help them to think critically about these issues.
I know before we got to where we are today, tolerance was defined as, I disagree with you, but I'll defend your right to believe it. So now, once again, can you share with our viewers how they can take part in the Canadian Religious Freedom Summit?
Certainly. Just go to the website, freedomsummit.ca. You can register there so that you can join us online at 11 a.m. Mountain Time or in person if you're in the Ottawa area on Saturday, February 4th at 1 p.m. And the registration is just to give an idea, so we've got kind of bandwidth that's needed for online. But we do look forward to having you join us, and please spread the word to others.
And the Canadian Religious Freedom Summit is happening on February 4th. Darlene McLean is the Executive Director of the Christian Embassy of Canada. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.